Hi there, and thank you for tuning in. There are 4 things that I like about this lens already before I have opened the box. The first thing is that this is a lens for the Nikon Z mount, and we start seeing competitors coming to the scene. The other week I reviewed this Viltrox lens, but today it is the one here from TTArtisan. But we see more and more competitors making lenses for the Nikon Z mount. This is great news. It gives us more options and it gives us more lenses to choose from, and this is good. And I think actually also it helps Nikon, because then it makes the Nikon Z bodies more attractive. This lens is not a full frame lens. It's made for the Nikon APS-C bodies, so I will be testing it on a Nikon Z50. The second thing I really like about this lens is the price, and it's around $100. This is May 2022, so check the prices and remember to factor in both import taxes and transportation costs. But I still think even if you do that, and even though the price has gone up relative to when I made this video, I still think this is a very, very budget-friendly lens. I did not buy this one myself. I was so lucky that TTArtisan sent me a copy for review. So thank you for that. But they have given me a free hand to make this review, so no strings attached. The third thing I like here is the weight, and you can see they have been kind enough to write the weight here on the side of the box, 335 grams. And I think it's a signal that this is a well-built lens. It reminds me of back in the days when we had these lenses from Nikon, made in Japan, all steel, all glass, and no plastic, hardly no plastic. It gives me a little bit the expectation this is what I will find in here. We'll see. And then the fourth thing that I like, and this is maybe more on the soft side, I really like that they have closed the box with tape. Of course you can tamper with this and so on, but it gives me the feeling that I am the first one to open this box since it left the factory. And that is quite nice. It is not all camera producers who do that. So I think it's great that the TTArtisan do that. Won't give me any better pictures, but it just feels nice when you open the parcel. With all that, let's get cracking. So a little Benny Hill intermezzo here, but there isn't much more in the box than the lens, a warranty, and a very short guide. This is a 50mm lens, meaning it is 75mm full frame equivalent. 1.2, which is very fast, if you ask me. And it ranges from 1.2, as you can see here, up to 16. The aperture clicks is very nice, but there are clicks, so videographers may not like this, but I certainly do, and it feels nice. The focus also it's somewhat tight, meaning I need to use some force, more force than the Viltrox I tested the other day. But it is nicely damped, and it is very easy to put some precision here, I would say. The throw isn't very long, so if I just put my finger here and to illustrate, but I will put the specs on the screen, but it is not long, and if you want to focus precisely, because there's no autofocus in this lens, then that could be an issue. I will test that a bit later. But the throw is initially a bit short, I would say. You see here that it's nice. Everything is built in metal. And that means you can, instead of, if this was built in plastic, then it would be worn down over the years. But I think this will last for a very, very long time. But you can see there are no CPU contacts. And that means that your camera won't know which lens it is that is mounted here. And normally that, I mean, you can do things on other cameras like setting it up in configuration so that it's a non-CPU lens, but I don't think my Nikon Z50 supports that. That's one thing. And the other thing is that when you don't have a recognition of the lens, you don't have a profile in, for instance, Lightroom that I use as my post-processing software. And this means that if I am to compensate for distortion and vignetting, then I need to do that manually. And normally I don't mind that because it's just a click away, and I normally don't talk about vignetting and distortion. But in this case, I think I will, because I have to do that manually. If we look at the aperture here, you can see the aperture blades. There are 10 of them, and you can see how they close down like this. And they have a little bit an untraditional shape. Normally blades are either straight or rounded, but these are rounded, but you can see there is like, it's a little wave. Each blade is a little wave, and I'll need to test how that looks, but normally you can see the shape of the aperture blades when you stop down in the bokeh. And here I would expect to see some funny results, but that will be interesting to test. I don't know why they have done it like this. It must be because then you get a particular shape when you get really, really close down. Then you get some very nice bokeh effects here. But for sure, when you're not stopped down and you're not fully open, then you have this pattern that I'm showing here. So that will be interesting to test. That's a little bit unusual. So in conclusion here, I would say that my impression just from listing the box was very right. It is a super solid built lens here. A nice quality. A nice aperture ring here. Some may prefer that the aperture ring sits closer to the camera. I think you will just get used to it. So that's not a biggie for me. The throw is a little bit short. I miss the CPU contacts. I miss also a gasket to help keep dust out here. I am only too aware that the Z50 is not weather sealed, but still, it would have been nice. All in all, I would say I'm very impressed with the build quality and the feel of this lens. So I look forward to testing it. So if we look at the center sharpness here, for starters, you can see the watch here. The Satina is much less sharp, fully open, than it is stop down here to f5.6. And also if you study the 27, I think it's difficult not to agree that it is much sharper at 5.6. Also here, if you look at the pillars, you can see that they are sharper at 5.6. And if we go down here and read the 193, you can see here it is sharper. So center sharpness, not surprised perhaps that it is sharper. I had actually hoped to see a little bit better center sharpness because that's the important thing. Corner sharpness here, if you study the bricks in the bridge, you can see it's much sharper here to the right stop down, and also the Euro note sign. Much better contrast especially, but also better sharpness. Top right, if we just go and look again at the pillars here, and you can see over here, you can see it says New York. On a good day, that's not very possible here to the left. And you can also see, if you see the 05s here, again, much sharper, of course, stop down. But I think the corner sharpness is perhaps not such a big issue, but I would definitely say that center sharpness missing at 1.2, that could be an issue for some. But the biggest issue, as I see it, is right here, that the center sharpness fully open is not as good as what I'd hoped for. If we look at some real world examples instead of the lab test, here a piece of wood, and I think there's plenty of detail here, lots of detail, and it looks really good. And this is of course not shot fully open, but still, I really like this image, lots of detail, but also a little bit of haze or mystery that I really like, but still lots of detail here. Here I would like to show you the details here in the hair on the leaf. You can see actually how much I zoom in, 400%. So there's plenty of detail here. Also here, the structure in the wood, the tree here, and also here I was impressed with the level of detail. This is a rope, a pretty worn rope, I would say, from a harbor, but still notice all the details you can see here. And here also, very nice details if you zoom in. Here maybe I'd hoped for a little bit more detail in the spider web. Could argue it's yours truly who cannot figure out how to focus manually, but I think that is not the case. But a little bit more there. Maybe that's a case where I missed details. Here again, lots of detail, lots of sharpness, good contrast. And finally here, just a wall to illustrate how much I actually zoom in. You can see down here there's a little sign, And if I zoom in, you can see it says alarm. And then if I zoom out again, that's difficult to see. Many will probably not miss the sharpness wide open in the center. And I think in these real world examples, there's plenty of detail. The center sharpness in the lab test is not up to the best I've seen. And certainly it's not as good as the lens itself is at 5.6. So here are some sample images to illustrate how the lens performs in terms of color rendition. And I think especially brown, it renders very, very nicely. You can see here the rust colors. Whereas the red, I think maybe is a little bit too aggressive, I think is the word that comes to mind. Green seems very fine. Blue perhaps is a little bit darker than what I remembered. And again here you can see brown, black, white, exactly as I recall the image. Here another color of green, a darker green here from the flower bed in the woods. And I think this looks very natural and excellent color rendition. I will say color rendition is subject to personal preference and what you're used to and what you like. But I think this lens does a good job. There's nothing that sticks out other than perhaps the red being a bit aggressive. Here, absolutely hideous colors, but this is also what it looked like in real life. So this is a really good replication or rendering. Here to the right, you can see that I think the red is a little bit aggressive again. But it could be me again here. Rust and brown is rendered really, really well. The red here on the brake on the Porsche is a little bit aggressive. Here very well. As I recall it, again here the flags somewhat aggressive. But nothing that really sticks out. I think it does a decent job here. Especially the purple here towards the end is absolutely spot on, if you ask me. Just to baseline or give you a reference point, I shot also with the kit lens. You can see the kit lens here to the left, and we have the TTArtisan to the right, and you can see there's absolutely no EXIF information here. So if we zoom in and just look at the colors here, you can see, as far as I can tell, they are very, very similar. The red here, I've been after the red for the TTArtisan, but it actually looks a little bit more pale than what the Nikon lens does. The other area here that's perhaps more orange looks, it is red I guess, but it looks very much the same. So other than the focus and the sharpness here, due to the work of yours truly, I think it looks very similar. Maybe there's a little bit different in the yellow here, but overall I would say I'm nitpicking. The blue here maybe also is a little bit more saturated with the Nikon lens. But again, I mean, we are really, really into the finer details here. I think this lens, if you ask me, I wouldn't notice that I had switched lens, at least for color rendition reasons. And I think the lens from TTArtisan does a really good job of rendering very close to what the Nikon lens would do. The specs say that you get 50 centimeters as the minimum focus distance. As you can see here, my test shows exactly the same. So I think this is not close enough, if you ask me. I always want to get closer to my subject, and therefore I have to bring this up as an improvement point. But I will say that it didn't bother me quite as much as I'm used to, and I think this has to do with the fact that this lens is a 75mm full frame equivalent, and therefore the angle of view is 32 degrees, so you are relatively close to your subject still. Even though you can't go as close to your subject, you can still fill the frame relatively well. But I want more. I want to get even closer to my subject, and therefore I have to bring this up as an improvement point for this lens. I would like to see a shorter minimum focus distance here. So here's my normal test of aberrations, and here I'm shooting at f1.2 fully open. And you can see maybe there's a little bit purple if you really want to be nitpicky, but I think actually this is okay. And stop down, of course, you would expect to see more depth of field, but also that has less of the purple fringing. If we then put a piece of tinfoil in the foreground before the focal plane, you can see now it becomes bad because there's definitely some coloring here going on. A piece of tinfoil, yeah, it didn't look like this in real life, I can assure you. Looking at a real world example, you can see here, if I go close to this branch or this straw, you can see it's clearly purple here, and also it's purple here. I'm not saying you can't fix this if you really want to play with sliders in Lightroom. You can see this is bad, if you ask me. It really is a lot of purple that wasn't there in real life, and it's so much you can actually see it. And also here. So a lot of aberrations in various forms. And if I then try to be a bit more brutal and shoot with a flash, then you will see that it turns really ugly, because here and here and here, yeah, you can see it for yourself. There's a lot of green going on. And if we then turn to the tinfoil here down, bottom left, you can see that, oh, there's pink and there's green, and it shouldn't look like this. Again, going back to a real world example, you can see here in the details here, there are things that shouldn't be there. And of course you can remove this to some extent with working with sliders in Lightroom, but I think it is so much that I have to put this on the con side and say this lens has so much chromatic aberration that I think it is an issue. Perhaps it's one of the biggest issues with this lens. Normally I don't really deal that much with vignetting and distortion. I think it was a big issue back in the film days when it sort of sat on the film and you couldn't really get rid of it. But today with Lightroom and other good tools, we can just fix that with a click. This lens has no EXIF information because it has no CPU contacts, so it doesn't give us an automated option. You can see here in the bottom left and also in the bottom right, clearly there is distortion, and also you can see maybe curve here. If you study the top line here, and you can also see top right, there's some of the line that moves into the frame that doesn't do that all the way. So there is an element of distortion, and there also is an element of vignetting. What I find is that if I go into Lightroom and set the correction here for distortion to 5 and for vignetting to 5, then that takes care of most of it. And you can do that if you have a very demanding subject like this one. In most cases, I don't think anyone will ever notice neither the distortion nor the vignetting, but you can fix it if you desire. But I think it is, from the design of the lens, pretty well controlled. And in terms of the image quality, I don't think it's a biggie. Normally I test flare with a pointy light source like my iPhone here, and then afterwards I test it with a lamppost at night to see how it reacts to a larger light source. In both cases I find that the TTArtisan does a good job of dampening the flare. However, when shooting with the lens on a day with the sun almost in zenith, I noticed a strong flare, as you see here. My Nikon lenses normally just display a milky white flare, but this is a bit different. I'm not a big fan of this flare, but we are into personal preference territory here. When the light hits the lens from a less steep angle, I find that the dampening works well. As you can see here, this lens suffers from focus breathing when I'm shifting the focus from the rubber duck in the front to the cow in the back. And as a photographer, you may not care that much, but if you're a videographer, this of course could be a major issue for you. So Bokeh, fully open here. You can see, as you would expect, because the blades are not engaged, it's nice and round. I think this looks actually quite good. As soon as you stop down just a little bit, you start seeing the strange shape of the blades. We're into personal preference territory, but I don't like this, and I don't like you can see it's more bright in the edge of the bokeh balls here. I'm not super pleased with this, and as I stop down even further, you can really see the shape of the blades. But I think the point with that shape is when we come to the far end here, where it is fully stopped down, where you can see that the sun stars now start to look nice. I am a big fan of sun stars from lenses with straight blades, and I think that gives the most beautiful sun stars. This one does an okay job, even though it hasn't got straight blades. I think it does a really good job of getting very close to the sun stars you would see when you stop down fully. So it's a little bit give and take here. Fully open, very much approved. Fully closed, very much approved. In between, not so much. One thing is a lab test. Another thing is how things work in real life. And you can see here, I don't even think this is fully open, but I think it looks really nice. It renders the background beautifully. Here maybe a little bit that you can see the strange shape in the blades, but doesn't really bother me as much as the lab test did, I must admit. Here I've just tried a few shots where I've changed the aperture, so I'm stopping down as we go forward here. And I think also this, to me, looks more than approved. I have absolutely no complaints in this department. I think in real life, the blade design bothers me less than lab test showed. This is personal preference territory, so I'll let you be the judge here, but you can see the examples here and how the lens performs. So here in conclusion, the pro side, the first thing that comes to my mind is the value for money you get here. It's a really good lens. You have excellent build quality. It's also a fast lens, and all of that for $100. This is really great value for money. The bokeh in real life works really well. The Sunstars stop down looked really good, and also you get a lens that is sharp and has excellent contrast when you stop it down. And I think the vignetting and the distortion is not too bad. So all of these things I would count on the pro side. On the con side, I would mention two things that stick out. One is the chromatic aberrations, and if you shoot like me a lot into high contrast situations, this could be an issue for you. It is an issue for me, I must admit. And the other thing is maybe more on the comfort side, but the lack of CPU contacts gives me no EXIF information. I miss the EXIF information, and if I should pay just $10 more for having CPU contacts, I would happily do that. So these two things really sticks out. I would also mention that if you don't like manual focus, you should stay clear of this lens. I don't think vibration reduction is fair to expect. The sharpness and the contrast wide open, I mean, if you're shooting portraits, maybe it's sharp enough for you. But if you are very demanding and you want a lens that is super tack sharp, also wide open, this is not the one for you. It is a little bit soft. But as soon as you stop down, it gets better. It has focus breathing. As a photographer, you may not care. As a videographer, this could be an issue for you. The minimum focus distance is 50 centimeters, and that is, I always want to get closer to my subject. So maybe that is more on me than it is a relevant observation here, but I always want to get closer to my subject. So 50 centimeters is too much. I would like to have less here. And then finally, the weather sealing I would bring up. I know the Z50 camera body is not weather sealed, but anything, just a little gasket or something like that around the lens edge where I mount it to the camera would be really nice. Further, I would mention, I can't really put this in a pro or con bucket, but I would say it's a very fast lens. So when you shoot with it wide open and you're out in normal daylight, because the Z50 will only go to 1/2000 of a second, I very often had to stop down in order not to get overexposed images. So you may find that you need to factor in an ND filter in your budget. Color rendition, I thought it did okay, but personal preference territory. Flare control is definitely approved, but you could generate some flare if the light came from a sufficiently steep angle, whether you like that or not. I mean, personal preference territory. And then finally, the lens weight. I like a heavy lens, but relative to the kit lens, that is 200 grams, some may feel that your camera gets a little bit nose heavy. But all in all, I would say excellent value for money, and that's sort of the thing that I want to stand as the conclusion of this review. If you're on a budget and you want a good lens and you're not afraid of manual focus, definitely this lens should be on your shortlist. As always, thank you for watching. Don't forget that the sample images, you can find those in the description below. Take care. Bye-bye.